The W King D8 is 50 watts, Xtreme 2, 30 watts battery, 40 watts plug-in power, and that's why at 50 watts, W King is twice the price of the Xtreme 2, which is fair enough.
It's half the price.
It's off. The W King is twice the price.
Xtreme 2 is double the price.
You're saying this?
Yes, the W King is half the price.
Oh, right, I'm just going to check. W King D8 is 50 watts. It's about £80 at the moment on Amazon. The JBL Xtreme 2, 30 watts in battery, 40 watts plug-in power, £150 about on Amazon. W King's half the price. It's got more watts. Can it possibly be louder, better, a bargain? Talking about bargains, you will see I've got 3 speakers here. I'm intending to compare to each other because this could be Xtreme style at half the price. The Motion Plus at the moment, for me, the best bang for buck. And yes, I know there's a big difference in size. It's half the size. You know, it's not really fair to compare with the Xtreme 2, but on battery, the Xtreme 2 does not go as loud as the Motion Plus. So at the moment, Motion Plus is beating most comers around its price mark, say 0 to 150 quid. It's possible we've got a new king on the block. So I am going to compare these 3. Just to quickly tell you about the W King. In terms of specs, as I already said, on paper 50 watts, but of course there's many ways you can measure the power output. Could it really be 50 watts, which would be at 80 quid, quite a powerful speaker. I will point out it's IPX5. It's not all good news. You can't drop it in a swimming pool and still play with it. It's splash resistant only. IPX7 on both the Soundcore Motion Plus and the Xtreme 2, which means they can be submerged in up to 1 meter of water for 30 minutes, as you know, if you really wanted to. So splash proof only. I will say, okay, it is a very plasticky feeling speaker. There's not a huge amount of imagination that's gone into the design. It is basically a oblong box, which is fine by me. There's a strap which can't be removed. You may or may not like the colouring. You can have the letters in black or green, which also includes colour coordination with the end grills. So the end protectors, and you've got passive bass radiators under both of those, can come off. And it's quite easy to move the front grille. And I will be doing that in a future video. You've got a pair of 4,000 milliamp hour batteries in the W King, running at 7.4 volts. That's a total of 8,000 milliamp hours worth of battery, but obviously at 7.4 volts, you're going to get more power rather than more longevity. The codec is SBC, as you might expect. However, I will say, although the Xtreme 2 is also SBC, the Motion Plus, you do get aptX. The W King is still rocking Bluetooth 4.2. You do get Bluetooth 5 on the Motion Plus. All of these speakers can be played as a stereo pair. I've only got one of the W King. I was going to see if it was any good or not. If it's any good, you'll see by the end of the video, I will probably get a second one, which means 2 of these for the price of 1 Xtreme. You do get USB-C connection. You do get an auxiliary input. In terms of weight, you can see it is a lot bigger than the Motion Plus. In terms of weight, similar to the Xtreme 2, about 2.4 kilos. Weirdly, at this price, of the 3, it's the only one that comes with NFC, near field communication. You can use it as a power bank. And in terms of drivers, we do have 2 65mm woofers, 2 35mm tweeters, and 2 passive radiators, 1 on each side. There's not a lot to it. There's no app that goes with it. And I will say, you know, if you maybe used to press an on button and it coming on. And just to say, this caught me out. If you just press the power button, it lights up, but it's only telling you the amount of power you've got. That's not actually on. If I want to turn that on, I'm going to hold it down. And then the tone tells me it's coming on. You do have volume up, volume down, play, pause, and you do have an EQ button. So if I press that, you'll see that the blue LED starts flashing. That's how I know I'm in EQ mode. So obviously my first question was, how does the EQ mode alter the sound? So I'm just looking to see what is the difference between default mode and EQ mode. So the most obvious thing when you press that EQ mode, it goes louder, a lot louder, weirdly loud, at 33%, up to 8 decibels of lift just by pressing EQ. Now, when I came and looked at my test tone tests, I'm seeing something like this. I'm measuring them at the same volume. I'm looking at default mode, there's something like a 10 decibel lift at bass peak compared to the lows on the mids. If I look at the EQ mode, the lift is about 8 decibels. So I'm thinking to myself, default mode is a bass heavy mode, EQ mode must be a flatter mode, albeit strangely a hell of a lot louder, 66%. It's the same thing, a massive decibel increase when you hit the EQ mode, and the bass lift in terms of bass peak compared to mids and highs low makes the default mode sound bass heavy. So I still think in bass mode, flatter mode, if you hit the EQ button, flatter but louder, maximum volume, it's still that huge decibel lift when you hit EQ button. It goes a hell of a lot louder. And although in absolute terms, clearly you got more bass when you hit the EQ button, in terms of actual frequency response, how does it actually sound? Well, look at what I call bass mode, which is the default mode. It's something like 3 decibels off peak, whereas on the flatter mode, although there is more bass, it's more like 5 decibels off the peak. So I'm still thinking your default mode is your bass mode because it's going to sound more bass prominent. EQ mode louder but flatter because the bass isn't quite as prominent. So the next thing is do some test tracks, actually hear the difference between the two modes. EQ mode clearly louder, so to make a proper comparison I need to volume match them. When I tested what volumes matched in terms of actually playing a track, I had to play the default mode at 66% volume to match what I'm calling flatter mode at 56% volumes. A 10% difference in volume, and it sounds like this.
I've been stuck on your memory, but it's not like I need it. And we may have some history, but we don't have to repeat it. You made this mess and left me with the pieces. Now I'm gonna burn all the bridges between us. I can't focus, I can't forget. I've been thinking too much lately. I just need to clear my head. 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 I just need to. I just need to clear my head. I just need to. I just need to clear my head. I just need to. I just need to clear my head. I just need to. I just need to clear my head. Can't focus, I can't forget. I've been thinking too much lately. I just need to clear my head.
So default mode 66% volume, EQ mode 56% volume in terms of actual sound pressure levels matched for volume. And then you get bass minus 21.3, bass minus 21.5. That was a shock to me. They're basically the same in the bass. I thought default mode would still be more bass heavy, and the only difference between them really is the high end lift in the EQ mode. So the EQ mode sounds nicer, brighter and louder. So what's going on? I thought I'd measure them again. This time frequency response properly matched for volume. When I volume match them in terms of test tones, are now matching at 50%, 66% with what I was calling bass mode, the default mode, 50% volume, what I was calling flatter mode, which is the EQ mode. And now look, it's basically the same, except that EQ mode has a bit more of a high-end lift. So actually, I thought default was a bass mode. I thought EQ mode was flatter, albeit louder. It looks to me, no. It's simply a louder EQ, hitting that EQ button, and you nicely get a bit more high-end lift, which makes it a little bit flatter, a little bit more pleasant. Default mode is basically a volume cut. And I was thinking, well, actually, given how loud it goes, by having a separate button for increasing the loudness does mean you've got more control over how quiet it will go and then how loud it will go, with the option of a bit of a high-end lift. So in my testing, I am going to leave EQ mode on, as that's going to give me all the loudness I need. It's going to give me a little bit of that high-end lift, which I actually quite like. And it's not really altering the sound anywhere else other than it's going massively louder. You may think just pressing that button it's doing something more amazing than it actually is, because of how much louder it suddenly goes pressing that EQ button. It is a bass heavy speaker, but mostly at lower volumes, where actually it's not a bad thing, but for me a little bit too boosted. Obviously you do like a low end boost, because at lower volumes your ears are less sensitive to the bass. In fact, I believe you don't even start hearing bass till about 70 dB. So although for me at low volumes, it's a bit too bass heavy, a bit too boomy. And my first thoughts were, yeah, it's okay. It's a boombox. It's just too much bass for me, my personal likings. Other people are going to love that. However, when I looked at the frequency response all the way up the volume, I can see by about halfway, by about 53% with EQ mode on, it's actually quite flat. So if you want to listen to loud listening levels, you're actually getting quite a flat sound in terms of my actual measurements. It agreed almost spot on with what they were claiming, 60 to 20 kilohertz plus or minus 3 decibels. For comparison, my testing with the Xtreme 2, 45 to 18 kilohertz, but that's at plus or minus 4 decibels. If I give the same range to the W King, 50 to 20 kilohertz plus or minus 4 decibels. So yes, the Xtreme 2 goes deeper, but not by that much actually. Obviously, the Soundcore Motion Plus is not really going to be outmatch these speakers for bass, but you actually want to listen to it properly. I'm going to compare them at 33%. Well, when I say 33%, I'm talking about, I'm going to play this W King D8 at 33%, but I'm volume matching them as you would if you were actually personally listening. I am not playing each one at 33%, but that would be pointless. It would make the W King sound way more dynamic than would really be the real world experience. So do know in this testing, the volumes I played at, which are 33% on the W King, 53% on the Soundcore Motion Plus, 56% on the Xtreme 2. Yes, on battery, the Motion Plus really does play a little bit louder.
I think the girls with their nails done now. Girls with their nails done. I think the girls with their nails done. Girls with their nails done. I think the girls with their nails done now. Girls with their nails done. I think the girls with their nails done. Girls with their
till we're all cried out. 'Cause we don't feel like throwing it all away. We don't feel like it. But this time it's not about escaping. We don't feel like it. We don't feel like it. 'Cause we don't feel like throwing it all away. We don't feel like it.
Average across both of those tracks. The W King minus 14.1, the Xtreme 2 minus 15.6. But remember, 56% volume, 33% volume. The W King kicks all over the JBL Xtreme 2 in terms of sheer loudness. The JBL Xtreme 2 is on battery, and when it comes to deeper low bass, it does a little bit better, albeit playing 23% louder. Minus 27 dB at 50 Hz, minus 28. It's only a decibel and 20% less volume on the W King, but it still holds its own against the JBL, not quite so extreme anymore, 2. The Motion Plus holds its own when you volume match, minus 15.9 in the bass peak, compared to 15.6, 14.1. Again, remember, playing 53% volume. It's actually playing a little bit quieter than the JBL Xtreme 2 at 56% volume. It's just, you know, when it comes to 50 Hz, when it gets into deeper bass, minus 38, minus 27, minus 28, it's like 10 dB down. But still, it's holding its own when you volume match. At the lower volumes in terms of 33% for the W King, it's just the leaner sound on the Motion Plus. So still at these lower volumes, there is that big bass boost on the W King. So at these volumes, which is still over 50% for the Xtreme 2, W King is actually matching, and in terms of upper bass, you could say beating the Xtreme 2. Wow, you know, at half the price. I wasn't expecting that much, and I wasn't expecting it to really be 50 watts, but, you know, in this first testing at 33%, I'm already thinking, you know, if you can live with the plasticky feel, ooh, this could be a new bargain speaker. So it's already clear the difference is at 33% volume, the W King is pretty much matching the Xtreme 2. For me, there's a boost around 5,000 Hertz on the Xtreme 2, which I personally find a bit harsh. I don't really like that clarity that they're trying to give it with that boost at 5,000 Hertz. Obviously, you're not getting the bass in the Soundcore, but you are getting a nice open high end, although it doesn't extend as high as the others, but in terms of open clear sound, that's where the Soundcore Motion Plus excels in terms of against these two speakers. So 66%, which means 66% on the W King. Of course, I've got EQ mode on. That means 73% volume on the Soundcore Motion Plus, and that means 80% already. Halfway here, but 80% now. We're on the Xtreme 2 when it's on battery.
Looks like we've come to the end of the road. There's no point in running away now. I'd rather sleep until the storm is gone. She'd rather be shooting at me now. I know it will end up in anger. I don't think we grew up, we just became older. She's aiming her words, ready to fire. I don't think that bullets will bring back desire. I don't think that bullets will bring back desire. Like a blink of an eye's not enough. She'd rather be staying for days now. I'd rather fix it than mess up again. She'd rather be burning it all now. I know it will end up in anger. I don't think we grew up, we just became older. She's aiming her words, ready to fire. I don't think that bullets will bring back desire.
So the thing to remember here, I have volume matched the speakers as best I can, which means W King D8 playing at 66% volume, Xtreme 2 on battery 80% volume, Motion Plus 73% volume. So remember, there's loads more headroom on the W King. At the same volume, it's going to be a hell of a lot louder. But this is, adjusting to your ears, about the same volume. The big difference is, the Xtreme 2 does have a more rounded bass, minus 21 dB 60 Hz, minus 26, 5 decibels louder for the Xtreme 2, albeit 80% versus 66% volume at 60 Hz, lower bass. Upper bass though, minus 20 for the W King at 100 Hz, minus 26 for the Xtreme 2. It's the other way around. So punch versus low-end rumble. When it comes to the Motion Plus, it's almost like the W King on steroids. They are very similar, albeit Motion Plus at 73%, W King 66%, but they both favour the upper bass. And volume matched, obviously loads more headroom on the W King, minus 20, 100 Hz, minus 24 for the Motion Plus. So volume matched, W King does beat the Motion Plus, and with extra headroom in terms of bass, minus 26, about the same lower bass. That's why I think the sound signature at these volume levels with EQ mode on the W King, they're both very similar. Of course, Motion Plus also has my custom settings. So the bass is a difference. Upper bass, rounded, lower end bass for the Xtreme 2. If you're wondering which is more accurate, here is the original across the two tracks. You'll notice we have a series of 4 peaks, just over 200 Hz, 170 Hz, around 100 Hz, about 55 Hz. Match them up. The Xtreme 2 does a good job, although it's a bit more rounded rather than the peak on the original. But the Motion Plus and the W King cannot produce that 4th peak. The peak's there, but it's below the upper bass peak of 100 Hz. So Xtreme 2 does have a more accurate, albeit over-rounded bass. But the W King has loads more headroom. W King, I will also point out, has more of a high end, as does the Motion Plus, with my custom settings, than the Xtreme 2. And there is the big difference between these speakers. The W King is Motion Plus on steroids, which means they have more of a high end than the Xtreme 2. They can produce some lower bass, but the Xtreme 2 has a more rounded lower bass. So these levels, okay, the W King sounds more of a realistic tuning. It's surprising me. So what is a real boombox at low volumes becomes actually a well-balanced speaker at these volume levels, whereas you have got the boombox on the Xtreme 2. So in terms of if you're only listening to the bass, which, you know, we tend to do on these quick ABs, you're not really getting a true real-world impression. It isn't possible in a short clip to really, you know, get the differences. You're just going to be attuned to differences in high end, differences in bass. So, yeah, all you can say is that 80% the Xtreme 2 probably is a bigger, more rounded, deeper bass than on the W King. So it's time to go to maximum volume. It's time to really push them, because this was exactly me. How much louder does the W King go? So maximum volume, 100%, all three speakers. W King Xtreme 2 on plug-in power, Motion Plus. Bringing up the rear, Xtreme 2 on battery power. So what we got, minus 15.1 average RMS across the complete frequency range, compared to 17.5 using plug-in power, not very portable, on the Xtreme 2. That's 2.5 decibels louder, the W King, than the Xtreme 2. It's a fuller sound. You can see the peaks at 2000 Hertz on W King, missing on the Xtreme 2. And it's got more of a high end as well, where the Xtreme 2 reading lacks. Xtreme 2 on AC power does have its best moment in the bass at 75 Hz minus 20, a decibel more than the W King, 6 decibels up at 60 Hz. But the W King has a big lower bass boost, which it does have from about 85% volume upwards, which means at 50 Hz, minus 26, minus 22, it's actually 2 decibels louder than the Xtreme 2. The big difference is W King has big upper bass peaks. If I'm looking at 150 Hz, minus 23, Xtreme 2, minus 27, upper bass 4 decibels louder on the W King, and it's a stronger sound all the way through, 15.1, minus 17.5. It tells the whole story. W King considerably louder at maximum volume than the Xtreme 2. Then the Motion Plus, which beats out the Xtreme 2 on battery power, 18.1, so it's not far behind the Xtreme 2, but it doesn't have the bass of the other two speakers. It's down on all marks. However, it does also have the upper bass peak, 150 Hz, minus 27, which is about the same as the Xtreme 2 on plug-in power, but still way behind the W King, bringing up the rear, Xtreme 2 on battery. What does that look like then, in terms of actual frequency response? If I'm just using test tones, maximum volume, all 4 speakers, you can see the W King D8 is stronger, basically all the way through until we just get to some of that lower bass, where the Xtreme 2 speakers take over. But then you get this lower bass boost from 50 Hz to 40 Hz, which kind of fills in that lower bass a little bit for the W King, where the Xtreme 2 just falls off a cliff. The W King does actually keep some of that lower bass even at maximum volume. Motion Plus, other than the bass, is stronger than the Xtreme 2, so it's matching it in terms of loudness except for lower bass. You can match it for upper bass, and it certainly has a high-end peak around 9,000 Hz, completely missing where it's actually dipping on the Xtreme 2. So again, Motion Plus holding up really well at maximum volume against the Xtreme 2, but the W King with its 50 watts pretty much really is the king now in terms of bass lamb in maximum volume. So it really is 50 watts. The Xtreme 2 has to be plugged in to get anywhere near the W King at maximum volume. It's half the price of the Xtreme 2. I'm thinking now, although, you know, if you're playing at lower volumes, it may be still too much of a boombox for you, although you can leave EQ mode off. I will say at lower volumes, you know, it's still a nice listen on the Soundcore Motion Plus. But which is a bigger bargain? So they're going to be available for around the same price depending on where and when you get it. Otherwise, the Motion Plus may be a little bit more. Sometimes it's 99 quid, sometimes it's 60 quid on Amazon. This is around 80 quid at the moment. I know it's not the greatest build quality in the world, but in terms of pure sound levels, in terms of what you are actually getting, which at the end of the day, the reason we're buying speakers because we want to listen to it. I think this is now, from the speakers that I personally heard, the biggest bargain. Pound for pound, I think you get the most money from the W King. So as much as I like the Max Sound Plus, as much as I love the Soundcore Motion Plus, as much as I love my Sony XB40, I think the W King is probably the best bargain. Just note that if you're playing at low volume, it's going to be a bass heavy speaker. You're going to have to quite like that. But if you play at loud volumes, it's going to be very well balanced. But maybe it's going to be too bass light for you. But I think all round, for the money, and for the fact that you can play two of these in stereo, and I can't wait to get a second one, yeah, for my money, wow, that is a bargain speaker. Best speaker 2020. There you go. Yeah, you've heard it here first. So I hope you got something out of this video, and thank you for watching.
UK